Something has shifted with Keith Urban, and people are starting to notice. It did not happen all at once. There was no single headline, no dramatic press conference, no prepared statement. Instead, it crept in quietly through small details that individually might have meant nothing, but together began painting a picture that fans could not ignore. A band that had stood beside him for decades was suddenly gone. Lyrics to one of his most beloved songs were being rewritten in real time on stage. A nearly 20-year marriage to one of the most famous women in the world had collapsed. And then, just when the dust from all of that seemed to be settling, he stood in front of a room full of country radio insiders at Nashville's legendary Ryman Auditorium and announced he was making a yacht rock album. The room went quiet for a moment, wondering if he was joking. He was not. For someone who built his entire identity on the guitar-driven heart of country music, every single one of these moves felt like a man deliberately stepping away from the life everyone thought they knew. The question is not whether Keith Urban is changing. The question is what is actually driving it, and whether the man himself fully understands the answer yet. To make sense of where Keith Urban is right now, you have to go back to a place that looks nothing like the sold-out arenas and Grammy stages that define his public image. He was born in New Zealand in 1967, but his family relocated to Australia while he was still a toddler, eventually putting down roots in Brisbane. His parents ran a small convenience store and lived just behind it, and even that modest picture slightly overstates the comfort of his early years. There were periods of genuine hardship. His family lived in a shed, for people sharing one open space with no real walls between them, no bedrooms, no separation from the world. His wife, Nicole Kidman, would later describe both of their childhoods using the phrase hardscrabble, and that word choice matters. These were not people who grew up with safety nets. Keith himself has said that every brick in the home he eventually built represents a gig he played to earn it, which is the kind of statement that only comes from someone who knows what it feels like to have nothing. The heaviest weight in that household, though, was not financial. His father battled alcoholism throughout Keith's childhood, and the atmosphere that created was one of tension and emotional distance rather than warmth. Keith has spoken about growing up in a home with no real intimacy, where physical discipline crossed lines it should not have crossed, where he cannot remember ever hearing his father say that he loved him. For years, he carried the belief that what happened to him was something he deserved. That is a wound that does not close quickly, if it ever closes completely. What his father did give him, though, was music. Country music was the one language the two of them shared, the single place where something resembling connection existed. That thread proved powerful enough to outlast everything else. At 4 years old, Keith was given a ukulele. By 5, his parents had taken him to see Johnny Cash perform live, and something locked into place for him at that show. He later described watching Cash on that stage and being able to see himself up there. The dream felt immediate and real, not distant. By 7, he had a guitar. By 9, he was performing on Australian television. A judge dismissed him cruelly that night, called country music mediocre, took a shot at his voice, and told him to focus on something more serious. The word that stayed with Keith from that moment was not any of the criticism. It was the word the judge used almost accidentally, describing him as having an intrinsic quality. When Keith asked his mother what intrinsic meant, she told him it meant he was a natural. He held on to that and let the rest go. At 10, the family home burned to the ground while no one was inside. The community that surrounded them responded with extraordinary generosity, neighbors bringing food and clothing and opening their doors, and Keith absorbed that lesson about what people are capable of offering each other in the worst moments. By 15, he had already made up his mind. He laid it all out for his mother, explaining that he could be playing shows multiple nights a week, earning real money, gaining the experience that no classroom was going to give him. Somehow, she agreed. That decision changed everything. He threw himself into the Brisbane music scene with the kind of intensity that only comes from someone who has decided this is the only option. Long nights in clubs and bars, playing whatever the crowd wanted, rock, pop, country, anything that kept the room interested. In 1991, he released a self-titled debut album in Australia through EMI, and while it was not a global event, it opened doors. He found himself opening for Slim Dusty, one of the most revered figures in Australian music, a man whose autograph Keith had once waited in line to get as a kid. On that tour, Slim said something that redirected how Keith thought about performing. When Keith mentioned there were only a few shows left, expecting Slim to feel the relief he was feeling, Slim went quiet instead. He reflected on the fact that he only had a few more chances to connect with his audience. That shift in perspective hit hard. Keith realized he had been treating the stage as routine rather than privilege, and he never entirely forgot that lesson. But Australia, as much as it had given him, could only take him so far. In 1992, he made the move to Nashville, the place where country music lives and breathes, the place where you find out if you are actually as good as you think you are. Nashville humbled him. He spent years grinding without breaking through, eventually forming a band called The Ranch, signing with Capitol Records, releasing an album in 1997 that felt like the moment everything would finally click. It did not. They toured in a worn-out van, played to thin crowds, watched the momentum slowly drain away until there was nothing left to sustain it. The band eventually fell apart. But something important was happening underneath that failure. His songwriting was getting noticed. Artists like the Chicks were recording his material. The industry was beginning to separate Keith Urban, the hit songwriter, from the struggling band member, and Capitol Records gave him another shot, this time as a solo artist. He released his American debut in 1999, and this time the response was different on a fundamental level. Songs like "But for the Grace of God" gave him his first #1 on the American country charts. The album went platinum quickly. By 2001, he was standing on the CMA Award stage receiving the Horizon Award, the honor given to the year's most compelling new artist. The weight of everything that had come before that moment, the shed in Brisbane, the burned house, the failed band, the van, all of it was present in that room. What was also present, though hidden from everyone watching, was something far darker. Beneath the talent and the momentum and the recognition was a man fighting something that had been growing for years. The pressure of starting over in America, the fear of failure, the deep insecurity that off-stage felt like his true companion rather than the confidence he projected under the lights, all of it had opened a door to cocaine early in his Nashville years. What began as one decision became a pattern and then became something consuming. A relationship fell apart and the spiral deepened. He was living in a run-down place, staying up through the night, filling every empty hour with a habit, going from the stage to days of heavy use and back again. By 1998, he had reached a point where he could not keep going on that road. He checked himself into rehab. It was not easy, but it was necessary, and it changed him. A counselor told him something during that time that he has carried ever since, that life is not about walking perfectly in the light, but about always leaning toward it. No one gets it perfect. The goal is to keep trying anyway. That philosophy embedded itself in him and later in his music. What came next in his personal life felt, by his own description, less like a chapter beginning and more like life itself beginning. In 2005, both Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman attended the Good Day USA Gala in Los Angeles, a celebration of Australian talent. On paper they were a natural match, both born outside Australia but raised there, both carrying that identity with them into the world. In reality, the initial connection was lopsided. Nicole felt it immediately and openly. Keith felt it too, but that feeling made him retreat. He spent 4 months with her number in his phone and no ability to dial it. The fear of being wrong about her interest was stronger than everything else. When he finally pushed past it, things moved fast. On her birthday in June 2005, he showed up outside her New York apartment at 5 in the morning with a bouquet of gardenias. No speech, no production, just a quiet gesture that told her exactly who he was. By June 2006, they were married in Sydney. Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, and Naomi Watts were in the room. Keith performed at his own reception. He would later say that everything before Nicole was just the build-up. She was where life started. But the marriage did not get the easy beginning it deserved. 4 months after the wedding, Keith relapsed. He had been sober for years, but the isolation that came while Nicole was away working proved to be more than he could hold against. She led an intervention. He checked into treatment again, this time not just for himself, but with the full understanding of how much damage the relapse had done to a marriage that was barely a few months old. He has admitted openly that his actions in that period came close to ending everything before it had a chance to really begin. Infidelity rumors began circulating in those early years, detailed and persistent, clashing with the image the couple projected. They held their ground and worked through it. In 2008, they welcomed their first daughter, Sunday Rose. In 2010, their family grew again with the arrival of Faith Margaret, born via surrogate. Keith, a man who grew up without sisters and with emotional distance as the primary household language, was now raising 2 daughters, and he embraced it completely. 4 years after that, they looked like the definition of something real and lasting. But small moments kept surfacing that suggested the picture was more complicated than it appeared. Nicole once revealed that Keith sometimes needed to retreat from the energy of their home, that she would find him tucked away in a closet with his guitar, just trying to reset. Their schedules pulled them in opposite directions constantly, and by 2022 Keith was attending major awards shows alone, while Nicole was tied up filming across the country. By 2024, his answers about the marriage at public events had become careful and restrained, the words of someone who understood there were no easy explanations available. Then in the summer of 2025, reports began emerging that the two had been living separately for months. On September 30, 2025, Nicole filed for divorce in Nashville, citing irreconcilable differences and listing that same date as their date of separation. After 19 years of marriage, it was over. The internet did not wait long before it started trying to explain why. Footage surfaced from Keith's concert at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas in which he had changed the lyrics to The Fighter, the song he wrote about the early days of his romance with Nicole, and directed a new version of those words toward his touring guitarist, 25-year-old Maggie Baugh, telling the crowd he would be her guitar player. That clip spread rapidly. Affair rumors attached themselves to Baugh's name almost immediately, and the timing made everything worse since she had shared video of herself performing alongside Keith just days before the divorce news broke. Her father posted a flat denial on Facebook. Country singer Alexandra Kay, a close friend of Baugh's, went on record with Taste of Country to describe the affair allegations as absolutely not true, adding that Baugh had a boyfriend and had nothing to do with the situation. Keith himself eventually addressed the speculation at the final stop of his tour, telling the crowd to stop reading so much into things. He later removed The Fighter from his setlist entirely. Whatever the full truth of that chapter is, it belongs to the people living it. What happened next with his band shook people in the country music world differently. In January 2025, Keith quietly announced that he was parting ways with his bandleader and bassist Jerry Flowers, a man who had stood beside him on stage for 25 years and had been with him all the way back to their days together in the ranch. Flowers announced the news on Instagram in terms that were gracious but made clear the decision had not been his. Shortly after, lead guitarist Nathan Barlow and drummer Terrence F. Clark were also let go. When Keith addressed the overhaul publicly, he said it felt right, that he had always followed an inner voice telling him when change was necessary. Whether that inner voice was speaking clearly or speaking from a place of upheaval is a question worth sitting with. On January 6, 2026, the divorce was finalized in Davidson County Circuit Court in Nashville. The settlement terms were filed that same day. Neither Keith nor Nicole would pay alimony or child support to the other. Their daughters, 17-year-old Sunday Rose and 15-year-old Faith Margaret, would spend 306 days a year with Nicole as primary parent and 59 days a year with Keith. He had pushed for a 50-50 split and did not get it. Sources close to the situation attributed the arrangement largely to logistics, with Nicole's filming schedule providing a more stable home base for the girls than Keith's ongoing tour commitments. The settlement also noted that all properties and assets would remain separate, suggesting that a prenuptial agreement had been in place long before any of this began. Since the finalization, Keith Urban has been moving. He headlined the C2C Festival in London, Belfast, and Glasgow in March 2026, his first UK show since 2022. He released his first ever live concert album, High and A, Live, recorded during his 2025 tour. He trimmed down, hired a new wardrobe and grooming team, and by multiple accounts appears to be in genuinely good spirits. Russell Dickerson, a friend and fellow artist, told interviewers in late March 2026 that Keith seems great and is doubling down on music with a focus that is almost beautiful to watch from the outside. He also announced his return to Fontainebleau, Las Vegas for 2 nights in October 2026. And then came the announcement that perhaps more than any other single thing captures where Keith Urban's head is right now. Standing on stage at the Ryman Auditorium during the country radio seminar in March 2026, he told the room that his next record would be a covers album. Then he told them the theme. Yacht rock. Smooth, laid-back, late 70s and early 80s songs built for calm water and open air. The kind of music that does not demand anything from you except to breathe and let it wash over you. He played pieces of Stephen Bishop's On and Robbie Dupree's Steal Away and a new original called We Go Back to prove he meant it. The room reportedly needed a moment to process it. He assured them he was not joking. For a man who spent most of his life chasing something, proving something, fighting through something, The image of Keith Urban turning toward the smoothest, most unhurried genre of music that exists carries a weight that goes beyond a simple artistic pivot. It sounds, more than anything else, like a man who has finally decided to stop white-knuckling his way through and just let himself sail.